So we started discussing last week some introductions to mitzvahs given in Sefer Bereshis, and we'll continue on that. We'll discuss a little bit about the mitzvah Bikur Cholim, the mitzvah of visiting the sick. The Rambam writes in Hilchas Avel, he writes all these mitzvahs, Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, Nicham Avelim, comforting the mourners, Kfuras Hameis, etc. He goes on, are all under the rubric of Yahavta L'Orecha Kamocha. They're all under one big umbrella. And he writes, Divrei Sofrim, and whatever that means in a second we'll get to, and the words of the Sofrim, he says they instituted specifically the mitzvah. So some learn to mean it's only D'Rabbanan, that the specific mitzvah is only D'Rabbanan of Nicham Avelim, but it's a kiyum, it's a fulfillment of a general mitzvah of Yahavta L'Orecha Kamocha. Others say no. There's a famous Rambam in Kedushin regarding Kedushei Kesef, where he also uses the words Divrei Sofrim. So some say Divrei Sofrim here doesn't mean D'Rabbanan, it means it's a halacha Moshe Misinai. It's a biblical law. It goes back to the days of Moshe and Har Sinai. As we mentioned last week, some Achronim say that some of the Anhagas by the Avos, Kodem and Torah, that takes on the status of a mitzvah min HaTorah. We can learn out from the Avos that the Gemara brings down that God did Bikur Cholim, God did Nicham Avelim, and Avram did Haknas Zarchim. We can learn out from the Hagas of the Avos that it's even a Din Daraisa. So either way, according to Machlokas among the Rishonim, whether Bikur Cholim itself, everyone agrees it's a fulfillment of the Daraisa, whether the Chiyuv is Daraisa, that's a discussion. The Hilchah, the Baal Hilchas Gedol, he even counts it. In one of the 613 mitzvahs, he counts Bikur Cholim as one. So the question is whether Bikur Cholim is biblical or rabbinical. The question the Mefarshim, the commentators ask is, where is the Bracha? And we have a general rule, the Gemara tells us in Psachim and other places, that before you do, we usually make a Bracha over Lasiyas, and before you do the mitzvah, you make a Bracha. So whether Bikur Cholim and our minig is not only do we make brachas on mitzvahs min HaTorah, which we do, we also make brachas on mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. Chanukah is coming up soon, and that's the whole Gemara. The source of the din of d'Rabbanan come the Heichan Tzivanu. How do we know? How could you make a bracha? Asher Kiddush Shalo b'mitzosa v'tzivanu v'halak nir shel Chanukah. How could you make the bracha? So, based on, because the Torah says, Go Sasser, that the Torah gives the power to the Chachamim to make the bracha. So the question, do we know, we make brachas on mitzvahs min HaTorah, we make brachas on mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. In fact, on many minhagim, the minig Ashkenaz is to make brachas as well. And the classic machlokas, the Svardim and Ashkenaz is Chatzi Halel on Rosh Chodesh, which is only, everyone agrees it's only a minig to say Halel on Rosh Chodesh, that's why it's Chatzi Halel. So the minig Ashkenaz, we even make a bracha on Halel on Rosh Chodesh. So we even make brachas on Minhagim. So certainly the question is, why no bracha on Bikur Cholim? And the Mefarshim even make it a more generic rule. Why not on Gemilas Chasadim in general? But we'll focus on Bikur Cholim specifically, as well as some general rules. So the first answer is from the Or Zarua.
Very nice.
The Or Zarua answer is, he says, Gemilas Chasadim and Bikur Cholim, but Gemilas Chasadim in general, it's a mitzvah she'ein lahem ein lo shir. That's what the Gemara says by Bikur Cholim. Bikur Cholim is a mitzvah that doesn't have a shir. You can even do it 100 times a day. Afilo mea pa'amim, you can visit someone. In fact, there's a famous story with the Brisker Rav. I guess he was sick, and someone came, one of his Talmidim or a Nudnik came to visit him, and he couldn't get rid of him. He dropped all the hints. He just wouldn't leave. So he told him, he said, you know what? The Gemara says Bikur Cholim is a mitzvah which doesn't have a shir, and it says you can do it 100 times a day. And the Gemara also says you shouldn't do Bikur Cholim the first 3 hours of the day, because and the last 3 hours of the day. Either we'll come back to that, but the reason why you don't do Bikur Cholim the first 3 hours of the day is because the chol is going to look good. The first 3 hours I don't have to pray for him. And the last 3 hours, he's going to look half dead, so you're not going to pray for him either. So therefore, you do. That's what the Gemara says. But the Rambam and others point out that might be true. But there's another reason why they felt much more pragmatically. And you see it, when you see it in hospitals today. Like visiting hours begin at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. There's certain practical things that the staff has to do to take care of the cholet. So you don't want people coming in when they're giving the blood, or you won't be dressed properly. So therefore, the Rambam writes it's more of a pragmatic reason. It's not a good time to visit the cholet. He's taking care of it. Whatever the reason is, the Gemara says it's only. And the Aruch HaShulchan writes this isn't a halach. It's just an eitzah. That's why. What?
I understand. So then you shouldn't be visiting. If you are visiting, why couldn't you make a bracha?
No, I didn't get to why we didn't make a bracha yet. I'm just explaining why is 3 hours. So therefore you have the Briskerov story. So he says there are only 6 hours, assuming a 12-hour day, 6 hours you can't visit. You only have 6 hours to visit 100 times. If you do the mathematics, he said, it's only like a couple of minutes each visit. So after that, then they got the hint and he left. But the point being, she'ein la shir. On one hand, you want as many visitors, but you also have to be the balance. Sometimes you have to know if the chola wants visitors, and that's a separate challenge. You always need a balance. But we'll come back to that when we get into more details of Bikur Cholim. So it's something which she'ein lahem shir. So the Arzarua has a klal in Hilchas Brachas. He says any mitzvah she'ein lahem shir, that it's a continuous mitzvah. It's a mitzvah tamidus. It's all the time. Chazal never instituted a bracha on, and therefore since Chesed in general, Bikur Cholim can be done at any time, even though the Gemara says not to, but that's only an eitzah. Strictly speaking, you could do Bikur Cholim any time. So Chazal never instituted a bracha on a mitzvah she'ein lahem shir. That's what the Arzarua asked. I'm sure Joel is bothered, but what do you mean? We do it every morning. Talmud Torah, V'gisa bo yomam v'layla. We have a mitzvah 24/7, and of course we take off for sleeping, for eating, for relaxing, working, but every other time we're involved in Talmud Torah. So yet we know we make a bracha every morning, men and women alike. We're chayiv in birkas haTorah la'asok b'divrei Torah, v'harevna, asher b'chabano. So that's something she'ein lahem shir. So what does the Arzarua mean? You don't make a bracha on a mitzvah she'ein lahem shir. So perhaps we could make a distinction in a couple ways. One is the Arzarua is talking about a birkas hamitzvah, a bracha you make on a mitzvah. So therefore, until we make a bracha, that's a set time. But on something which ein lahem shir, you don't make a bracha. But according to some Rishonim, that Birkas HaTorah isn't necessarily a bracha on Talmud Torah. It's what the Ramban, Nachmanides, calls, it's a Birkas Shevach V'Hodah. It's a bracha with thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he gave us the Torah. It's not on the mitzvah of Talmud Torah per se. That's why both men and women are equally obligated in this bracha. It's a mitzvah. The Torah was given to Klal Yisrael, and we're thanking God on the institutions the Torah was given. So this klal of not breaking a bracha on a shir is only on a birkas hamitzvah, but the other types of brachas, as we'll see, there's birkas hamitzvah, there's birkas hashevach v'hodah. We'll see there's birkas hanenin, the bracha you make before you eat. Chazal only had this. The Arzarua says the principle only applies to a birkas hamitzvah, so perhaps birkas haTorah isn't a mitzvah. Or perhaps you could suggest another reason, because when I looked up the Arzarua, he said, what was the reason the Arzarua gave? Why don't you make? What's the logic? Why don't you make a bracha on a mitzvah if the mitzvah is continuous? So make it once, and that will cover me the whole day. Why don't I make a bracha? So the Arzarua writes, because you're not going to have the chivav. There's not going to be chavav alone. When you make a bracha, as we all know, it's supposed to be besimcha. Shechiyanu is a separate bracha, even an additional element of simcha. But brachas in general, when you make a bracha, you're supposed to do it besimcha, and you're supposed to excitement. It's new, so it's something which happens all the time. The Arzarua is concerned that you're not going to have that chiva, that excitement for the bracha, and therefore you wouldn't make a bracha on it. But however, that's only by general mitzvahs. Because what's the general rule by mitzvahs? Mitzvahs lav lahanos. The Gemara tells us a principle. Like the Gemara tells us in the Darim, if someone takes a neder, a vow saying, I'm not going to get benefit from Ruvain, and then he wants to use Ruvain's iPhone, or he wants to borrow Ruvain's tefillin, or he wants to borrow some dishes, he can't use it. He took a neder not to get benefit. But on a mitzvah, let's say he said on a tefillin, on a dvar mitzvah, we say mitzvahs lav lahanos nitnu, and one would be permitted to benefit for the purposes of mitzvah. However, the Gemara tells us in the Rishonim, however, Talmud Torah is the exception to the rule. The Taz writes, Talmud Torah lahanos nitnu. The purpose of Talmud Torah is to enjoy it. You shouldn't be learning Torah like you're shaking a lulav. But I mean is, the major reason to shake a lulav is because God commanded me. That's why I have to do it. But of course, by Talmud Torah, there's Kashyat Tziva Hashem, but that's not enough. To be successful in learning, as the Iglei Tal writes in his introduction, people think, Amelis Batorah, working hard on Torah. You know what that means? I'll spend my whole time looking up in the dictionary, the Jastro, looking up words, which you can, it's okay. Or, you know what? There's two topics I like. One I enjoy a lot, one I dislike. I'll get more if I study the things I find boring or I don't like. I'm going to get a lot of schar. It's just the opposite. The purpose of Talmud Torah is you're supposed to pick something you do like, and therefore Talmud Torah lahanos nitnu. And therefore, if someone took a neder not to benefit from Ruvain, so he can't go to Ruvain Shir, he can't borrow Ruvain Sefer because Talmud Torah is different. So perhaps maybe that's why that Talmud Torah. So we're not worried, even though it's a mitzvah to me this, but Talmud Torah lahanos nitnu, and therefore we're not concerned. You can make the bracha. But by other mitzvahs that you're going to be lacking the chiva of, so the Or writes that's why Chazal said no bracha. So that's one answer from the Or Zarua. We don't make a bracha on Bikur Cholim or generally mitzvahs gemilas chasadim because it's something she'en lam shiur. I birchas Torah, either that's a birchas shavach v'aldah like the Ramban says, or perhaps because the whole issue is of chivav, and by other mitzvahs it's lav lahanos nitnu, so we're not going to have that excitement doing it. But Talmud Torah lahanos nitnu, therefore we're not concerned, and therefore we say even though it's a mitzvah she'en lam shiur, nevertheless you still make a bracha. That's one answer. Another answer is a famous answer of the Tshuvas Harashba.
The Ramban was clear that the whole thing is a birchas hodah?
No, the Ramban. You mean about the right?
Birchas Torah, or is it just the Shebach Rabbanu part?
But that's well. I guess he's assuming like the Gemara says that's the ikar of the brachas, right? You could make a distinction and say lasok b'divrei Torah is those Rishonim do say that, but the Ramban he talks in general, right? Implying that it's all a birchas. But let's see, he's just referring to Asher B'Chabana, which he holds is the ikar. So since you yotze with Asher B'Chabana, even though you're making the other one, that's still incidental, according to the Ramban. But the Ramban, he doesn't make a distinction between them. You're right, other Rishonim do. That the first bracha lasok is going on Talmud Torah, and the other bracha, there's a famous Rav Chaim on it. He says his language is going on the chefsa shel Torah. It's the object. That's why the Gemara in Brachas has a discussion on what type of Torah learning do you make a bracha on. So there's a discussion in the Gemara. Do I only make on Chumash? Do I also make on Medrash, Gemara, Mishnah? So what's that whole discussion? We make a bracha on everything. But what's that discussion? Perhaps some say only Torah, which has a chefsa shel Torah, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, maybe that. So that's a Rav Chaim or a different answer. But the different answer is given on why women make a bracha on Talmud Torah, even though strictly speaking, they're the pater from the mitzvah per se. So that's the one answer, Yor Zarua. Another is the famous Tshuvas Harashba. The Rashba is famous by the mitzvah of tzedakah, and then the people use it, but he doesn't limit it to tzedakah. It's true for all. The Rashba's principle is you only make a bracha on something which is, as much as anything in this world can be in our control. We still need HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, but something which is totally biyad acherim, any mitzvah which is dependent on someone else, so therefore Chazal never instituted a bracha. So the Rashba's classic case is tzedakah. You go an ani comes to your door, he knocks on the door and he asks for money. So therefore, and of course you're a good person, you'll give tzedakah, and then what happens is that let's say you give him $10. Are you kidding me? I'm not taking less than 100, or whatever the issue is. He doesn't. So the issue is the Rashba is going to be a bracha levatala. That you're not going to make a bracha al mitzvah tzedakah or whichever text we want, And since it's the mitzvah of tzedakah is dependent on the ani accepting it, which is like Chazal tell us that it's a two-way street. That's a negative. That's why we don't make a bracha. But that's what Chazal tell us. If you have a $20 bill fall out of your pocket, and you're not lucky about that, but if you're lucky enough that an ani picks it up, you get the mitzvah of tzedakah. Because the bottom line, it's result-oriented if you fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah. So since we see it's totally in the ani, it's not the mitzvah isn't you giving, the mitzvah is the ani actually receiving. That's why when you put money in the pushka, that's not really the mitzvah of tzedakah yet. I mean, you don't. That's the first part. Until the ani, if the tzedakah box is stolen, technically speaking, you won't get the mitzvah of tzedakah. Maybe machshava tova mitzvah l'maisa, you would get the reward, but in terms of purely technically speaking, if the ani doesn't get the money, you don't get the mitzvah of tzedakah. You see, you might get other things, but not the mitzvah of tzedakah. So they point out that since it's totally it's dependent on the ani accepting the money, hence Chazal said no bracha. So similarly here, let's say it's a case where Bikur Cholim, let's say you go and, he's not accepting it. I went in, I'm all excited, I made the bracha. Sorry, no visit, or perhaps even more, and we'll get into this perhaps also. Let's say you're a soneh, you're the enemy. Should the enemy go and visit? Let's say someone who clearly you don't get along with. So there's a shaila discussion among the poskim. If you don't get along with someone, if you're the enemy, should you go ahead and visit? So that's a discussion. So why wouldn't you? Because some say it looks like you're gloating, like the guy says, look, I'm here, you're sick in bed, you're dying, and see, I told you I was right, so therefore perhaps we'll get the chol upset, and the whole point of Bikur Cholim is to make them better. So there's a discussion in the poskim whether so similarly here, since you don't know if they're going to want to see you, it's totally bedas. It depends on the chola that you have to actually get to see the chola. So therefore, those mefarshim say that's why we don't make a bracha on Bikur Cholim, since we don't know for sure. You can let it in.
So why don't you make it? So in places where it's impossible to do before, you often do it after.
Yeah, right, it's a good question. Where do we find we do it after?
Well, depending on, you have some say by bris.
Right,
and you have
by where? Yes, right. But that's something. Yeah, but that.
Gerus,
mitzvah. No, right. We'll get to that. But okay, what Joel's asking is there's a whole discussion on the mitzvah of kedushin. Everyone agrees it's a mitzvah of pru revu, having children. The question is, why do you have to get married? Is married, it's not a mitzvah per se, but in order to have kids, you have to get married. Is that why? Or no? Independently, there's a separate mitzvah of marriage, and then there's also but the two so the Rambam's opinion is Maimonides that kedushin is an independent mitzvah. Kedushin is an independent mitzvah. And the Rush says no, the mitzvah is pru revu, there is no, and that's why the Rush says what is the nature of the bracha we make at the kedushin? It's a strange bracha. Well, not a strange bracha, but it's not the classical bracha, lasos kedushin, or whatever. Al mitzvahs kedushin. We got also what else? Arusa, Zvita, Nesua. It gets into chuppah kedushin. It's a whole long arichas, which leads the Rush to conclude that this is a bercha shavak v'hoda. There is no mitzvah of kedushin. It's a bracha on the institution of marriage. We're praising the institution of marriage, but it's not a bercha mitzvah. The Rambam disagrees and writes clearly that kedushin is a mitzvah, and he writes, and just like all other mitzvahs, you make the bracha before the mitzvah. So too by kedushin, first the Masada kedushin makes the bracha, and then you do the harei mikra, then you do the kedushin. So the Rambam states clearly kedushin is a mitzvah, and he says that's why you make the bracha first. So according to the Rush, you could discuss making the bracha afterwards. It's a bercha shavak v'hoda. There's no reason why it has to be before. Maybe some argue it might be better after. But the Rambam's opinion is kedushin's a berchas hamitzvah, and he says clearly you make the bracha before. Comes along the Ravid and disagrees. He says, he says the Ravid says no. He agrees it's a berchas hamitzvah like the Rambam. He agrees with the Rambam and the Rush. He agrees fundamentally with the Rambam. It's a berchas hamitzvah, but coincidentally speaking, he agrees with the Rush. You make the bracha after the kedushin. So what's the pshat in the Rabbi? Bishlam of the Rambam, it's a birchas hamitzvah. The bracha is before, like always. And according to the Rush, it's a birchas shavach. I understand to make it afterwards. But according to the Ravid, if kedushin's a mitzvah, so why don't you make it before? So that's what. So that's the concern. Who says the woman's going to accept the kedushin? It's the mitzvah dependent on someone else, and therefore the Ravid says you should make a bracha on. You should make the bracha afterwards on the kedushin. And so the question is, so why not here? So by Bikur Cholim, or let's say tzedakah, okay, true you can't make a bracha before, but once you go in the room and you already started Bikur Cholim, we'll get into making a bracha after the mitzvah. Let's assume you already know you got in. You wait to get permission, and then you'll make the bracha. So then why not make it afterwards? So number one, by tzedakah, we don't make it after either. So how come by tzedakah we don't make it after, and by kedushin we do? So apparently, if the only reason is that we don't make the bracha based on this reason, then one could argue you should make it after, like the Ravid. But by tzedakah, as we'll see, there are other reasons why you don't make a bracha on tzedakah. Let's say, as the Beis Yosef writes in Hilchos Pesach, there's a halacha. We know not only are you prohibited from eating chametz on Pesach, but you can't own chametz either. There's a prohibition of bal yirah, bal yimatzeh. So the different ways we do to avoid having chametz on Pesach. So we know we sell the chametz, but the Gemara tells us there's bittul chametz. We nullify the chametz to say the chametz is like hefker, it's not ours. And then we know we do the burning and the bedika and the biur. So the question is, the Gemara tells us, min Torah bittul bi'alma sagi. Min Torah, on the Torah level, it's enough to nullify your chametz in your heart. If you say to yourself, this chametz no longer belongs to me, you will not violate bal yirah on Pesach. But the rabbis were concerned, you might come to forget. You'll see the pastrami sandwich and you'll forget and you'll eat it. Since it's permitted all year round, so we do different things. Midrabanan, we get rid of it, we burn it, etc. So what bracha? We make the bracha on the bedika, which is only the rabbinical mitzvah. Bittul chametz is the biblical mitzvah. So it will make more sense if I'm making a bracha. It makes more sense I should make the bracha on the biblical mitzvah bittul over the rabbinical mitzvah bedika. So that's the famous Beis Yosef in Hilchos Pesach. He says because bittul b'leiv sagi. The luck is when Chazal were instituting brachas, they needed some demarcation, something concrete. It's always hard to go into someone's heart exactly what they're thinking. Most times we don't know our own motives half the time, and certainly figure out someone else's. In fact, it's much easier to figure out who's a Talmid Chacham versus who's a tzaddik. Because at least the Talmid Chacham, you can listen to the class, you give them a bechina, you can have some concrete. You have to know some basic knowledge. But a tzaddik, who knows who's a tzaddik, who isn't? It's the same thing here. When something's believed, because maybe you weren't, how do I know you're doing the mitzvah? He says he did it. So Chazal wanted to make sure that they always gave an action to the mitzvah, or if not, they wouldn't give the bracha. So they said no bracha on dvarim shebalev. So since, according to many, really tzedakah, fundamentally you become obligated once you commit balev. So perhaps it's a dvarim shebalev, and that's why. So we have to come up for other mitzvahs besides, as we're going to give other reasons. If it was just the reason of the Rashba, he'd have to explain why not afterwards. So tzedakah, why not afterwards? So we'll have to come on to another reason about, there has to be another reason why not. So we'll have a couple more reasons, and that's how we'll explain it. But basically, so far we have the Or Zarua, no bracha on Bikur Cholim because it's a continuous mitzvah, and no bracha according to the Rashba because it's totally b'das acherim. Third approach among the Achronim is that we have a principle the Gemara tells us in Megillah. The end of Megillah is talking about Kriyas HaTorah. Kriyas HaTorah, we know we read Monday, Thursday, Rosh Chodesh, Chol Hamoed, Yontif, Yom Kippur, Shabbos. And the Gemara, the Mishnah goes to when we do Haftorah, when we do Hosafis, etc. So one of the halachas the Gemara tells us is Ein Mafsikin Beklolos. Even though normally on Shabbos you have Hosafis, you add, you don't have to only have 7 aliyahs, you could have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. However, when you're reading Parshas Tochacha, either in Bikur Cholim or in Parshas Kisava, one says it only applies to Bikur Cholim, but that's not our issue here anyway. When you read the Tochacha, the Gemara says, Ein mafsikin b'kolos. The Mishnah says, you can't break up. When you're reading the Tochacha, don't break it up. Why not? Why can't you break it up? So one opinion in the Gemara is, because it's not appropriate, God's in the middle of giving us rebuke and musar, and God, wait, you put the pause button on God. Wait, I don't really want to hear it. Now let me go and do a couple other things. I'll come back and listen to you later. It's inappropriate. God's giving you rebuke. You don't cut him off in the middle. However, Rish Lakish gives another reason. You know why you don't make a bracha on prinios? You know why you're not mafsik on prinios? Because we don't want to make an added bracha ala prinios. That if you make, as we all know, if you make a hosafa, so the person finishes his bracha, and then you're calling someone else, they're going to make new brachas. We don't want to add new brachas to the tochacha, which is an interesting question. I thought that was the institution of Rav and Shmuel later on. The original institution of Kriyas HaTorah was there was only one bracha. There was always 7 aliyahs, but the Kohen got called up. He made the bracha. You called up Levi Yisrael, and then the person who finished off at the end, he made the bracha achrona. It wasn't until Rav and Shmuel came along and they instituted that people were coming late, missing. So they instituted everyone will make their own brachas. So what's Rish Lakish talking about? Ein mevarkin ala pruniya. So therefore, so that's the question. When Rav and Shmuel came along and made a new institution, every person gets a new aliyah. Was that just a technical change or a fundamental change? In other words, was it true that, let's say I came in the middle of Kriyas HaTorah, and I got Levi, I missed the beginning, so I didn't hear the person's bracha. Does that mean I just keep on going up? Or it's only for someone who was in shul? That's the question, whether it only worked for someone who was in shul, who heard it, but if you didn't hear it, you always had to make a bracha, or no? It was basically, the question is, was Kriyas HaTorah always one single unit, and therefore one bracha on the whole unit, or each one was an independent unit? So either way, so they point out that we see from here that someone answered that it wasn't always that way, even though you missed an aliyah, the bracha sometimes you would, sometimes you wouldn't. But what they point out here is, we used to do a 1-year cycle where we finish the Torah once a year. But in Yerushalayim, in the Yerushalmi, it's 3-year cycle. But let me point out, 3-year cycle means you take 3 years to do Bereshit, 3 weeks to do Bereshit. No, it's not like you do the first 1/3 of Bereshit, Noach, and then you keep on going back. But the institution was, and therefore you only had Simchas Torah really every 3 years, the way we have it. So, but as the institute independently, you have to read from the Tochacha before Rosh Hashanah. That was, so according to everybody, since it was a separate takana, you'd have to make a bracha on that anyway. So either way, that's what Rish Lakish says. You know why Ein Mafsikim B'Kolos? Because we don't want to add more brachas on prinios. And you have to imagine you walk in there, as we just said by Asone, you go in to do Bikur Cholim. The person's sick, he's half dead. Oh great, good to see you, I'm so happy. Just wait a second. Baruch atah, and it looks like you're so happy that the person's sick. Of course you wish he wasn't sick and you couldn't do so therefore, you don't want to make a bracha I'll kill on someone else's star. You're happy that person's sick, you should wish you didn't have to do Bikur Cholim. We should hope that everyone's healthy and not sick. So you don't want to make a bracha on something which appears, maybe everything's b'yad Hashem, we don't understand it. The bottom line is we don't want to, someone kuras hameis, nicham, let's make a bracha. Great, you're being menachem avo. But Chazal didn't want to enter something which is sad or not happy times. Chazal did not think it was appropriate to make a bracha. And therefore, Bikur Cholim, someone's sick, and by definition it's a chola. That's what we'll get into next time. Who exactly is, how much of a chola, how sick do you have to be to have a mitzvah? Because you could go anyway, but the question is how sick do you have to be to actually fulfill the mitzvah? So therefore it was inappropriate.
We make a bracha Baruch Dynamis.
Yeah, that's right. And also, right, when a person passes away.
At any point, I mean, we do make a bracha. So, I mean,
right, but that's
not a bracha on prani.
But that's not a birchas hamitzvah.
It's what it's a birchas sheva b'do.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Because in the future we will say hatov ha'metiv.
Yeah, I'm saying because in fact, and that there is a wrestling match. You do say daya, but if you get a yerusha, it says you also make a shechiyanu or a hatov ha'metiv. That's a
car.
Yeah, that's a discussion. No, but that's what they point out. It's not a birchas hamitzvah. So, but we do have a kal kashen shemavarach hatov chag mavarach ra. But it's true. But the bottom line is we see. That's why by all these things, by kfuras hamesim, nicham aveim, all these things, Chazal didn't want to make a bracha al prunias, and that's why let's say that there's a mitzvah v'heshav as agzela. There's a mitzvah to return a stolen object. Where's the bracha? Because it's something which came out to a davara. It's something that came out to an aveira. Why don't we make a bracha on tshuva? It's a mitzvah in our Torah according to the Ramban. But usually to do tshuva, you have to do something wrong. Whether even if you didn't sin, but we could all be better. So again, so the Chazal have this cloud throughout on a dava prunios and a dava ra. It doesn't look right. It's not appropriate. Chazal said no bracha. So that's the third approach. There's no bracha on Bikur Cholim.
Who says that?
I forget the different. I think it wasn't one person. I think I've seen it. Different. I've seen it by this combining by guys. Like different, one person said it by tshuva, one person said it by, so I'm just combining a bunch of different people into one. And a fourth approach is, why do we make a bracha on Bikur Cholim? So the Gemara tells us in Psachim, it goes to the details of the bracha we make. We make a bracha over l'asiyah, so we make a bracha before we do the mitzvah, then depending on the mitzvah, whether we do it whether we make the bracha before or after, so then the prefix la or al, depending like they mentioned, like by a ger, it's al hatfila, because al is obviously a guy can't make a bracha until he becomes Jewish, so you have to make the bracha after you come out of the mikvah. So therefore the text is al hatfila or al netila shadayim. Your hands are dirty. You're going to make a bracha while your hands are dirty. So there's different rules in the Rambam and Hilchos Brachas Perek Yud Aleph and the Gemara in Psachim, but the rule of thumb is that al is to making the bracha if you're doing the mitzvah afterwards and up. So either way, that's what the Gemara talks about. So what do we say? So Ashek Yishalom Mitzvah B'tzivano. We make a bracha. We want to recognizable you're doing a mitzvah. So some Achronim point out, why you don't make a bracha on Bikur Cholim, Tzedakah, and we can add on the list of mitzvahs, is because any mitzvah sichlas and any mitzvah that even Gentiles do, it's not just a Jewish practice. Gentiles visit Gentiles. Gentiles give tzedakah. That even though I could have made the opposite argument, I could have said, when I'm shaking a lulav, I don't really need a bracha. Like, why else am I doing it? Of course I'm doing it because, unless I'm crazy, I'm only doing it because God told me to. But something which isn't recognizable, that everyone, I should dafka make a bracha to show, but they don't, they say the opposite of me. So they have the opposite klal, that they only make a bracha when it's recognizable, inherently it's a mitzvah. And therefore tzedakah everyone does, and Bikur Cholim everyone does, Nicham Avelim, all these mitzvahs sichlis, Chazal never instituted a bracha. Like we have the klal by the Zayin, there's a whole question in terms of, we know that a non-Jew is obligated in the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. What are the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach? The way I remember them is the big 3. The 3 things we have to give up our lives for: Gila, Arais, illicit relations, Avodah Zarah, idol worship, and Shvichas Dam, murder. And then Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. Aleph is Aver Menachai, tearing a limb off a live animal. Beis, Birkas Hashem, it's a euphemism, cursing God, not blessing God. Gimel, Gezel, is stealing, kidnapping, and Dalit is dinim, is setting up a court system. So the question is a guy chayiv in tzedakah? It's not one of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, or is a guy chayiv in kibbud aveim? It's not one of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. It's a guy chayiv in gemilas chasadim, or like any of these things. So the many has, that's a separate share, but there's a Ran that writes that no, the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach is only the minimum. In addition to the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, any mitzvah sichos, again we'll have to explain then why is some of the time mitzvahs seem to be mitzvah sichos. But anyway, the Ran writes that it's the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach is the minimum, and then any mitzvah sichos, any common sense law that you can figure out on your own, even a non-Jew is obligated. How do I know a non-Jew is chayiv in tzedakah? So some of the Rishonim, Achronim, the Ramban writes others, because what happened last week's parsha? Anshe Sodom and Amorah were destroyed. Why were they destroyed? What does the pasuk say in Yeshaya? Because Yad Ani ve'Evyo, they didn't help the poor. So some Rishonim say, like, if they, it must be that a guy is chayiv in tzedakah. If he wasn't chayiv in tzedakah, then why? So either way, it's a separate discussion whether they are or not. But that's what the Ran writes on a mitzvah sichlis. A non-Jew is obligated. So same type of idea here. Any type of mitzvah sichlis, any type of common sense law that everyone does. Bikur Cholim, tzedakah, chesed, whatever you could add to the examples. Chazal said no bracha. We only make a bracha. That's why we don't on Suda Shabbos. We don't make a bracha. Suda Yontif, everyone eats, and so therefore on anything that everyone does, we don't make a bracha. We only make a bracha on something which is more uniquely Jewish. So that's a fourth approach. The fifth approach is the Rambam, Maimonides. He gives a much more general approach. He says as follows. He knows there are different categories we're all familiar with. There are actually 3 categories, but we'll get to the 3rd category maybe next week. But we'll go with the 2 basic categories. There are mitzvahs ben adam lamakom and mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro. The commandments between man and God, and the commandments ben adam l'chaveiro, and that's what the Gemara tells us in Kedushin. That's why you have the luchos. They have what's split into 2. You have the shtei luchos abris. The first 5 are commandments ben adam lamakom, and the second 5 are commandments ben adam l'chaveiro. So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Brachas, he says Chazal only instituted brachas on mitzvahs ben adam lamakom. On mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro, as a general, on any mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, Chazal said no bracha. What's the reason why Chazal didn't make? Why don't we make a bracha on mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro? So I'll give you a mashal. So saying, imagine you go, someone comes to your door. He's obviously poor, very hungry, and he says, I need some food, I'm starving. Oh great, you run into the kitchen, you get the food ready, you're about to give him the food, you say, 1 second. Baruch, of course that's when you have the bos kavana, on someone else's expense. Baruch, and the time you finish the bracha, the guy drops dead from starvation. So the point being is, it makes no sense. Chazal would not into the bracha on something that's going to take away from the mitzvah. The purpose of Edam HaChavero is to help the needy, is to help the person, to get the food in the person's mouth and stomach as quickly as possible. If a bracha is going to interfere with the mitzvah, then like the Chassid Shota, the Gemara tells us in Sota, a person's in the middle of davening and someone's drowning in the ocean, sorry, I can't go, I'm in the middle of... Obviously, as we learned from last week's Parsha, a general rule, Gedola hachnosus archim mikabolas penei hashchina. Greater is the mitzvah of entertaining guests and speaking to God. And what does it mean, Gedola? If you want to get to be more godly, acharei Hashem teilechu, you get a lot closer to God. You become more godly by imitating God, doing Bikur Cholim, doing Nicham Avelim, doing Kfura, all the mitzvahs of Edam HaChavero. That's how you become godly, by imitating God. And that's what the Rambam's klal is. You only make a bracha on a mitzvah ben adam l'makom. You don't make it as I think it's the Sri Deyesh writes by same concept by Shalach Manas. So why don't we make a bracha on Shalach Manas? So one of the purposes behind Shalach Manas is Ava Vareya, just you're trying to create a friendship. So I want to create a friendship. Wait, do you know why I'm giving it to you? Wait a second. I have to. Sorry, God's making me. It's a mitzvah to give you. So even though it's true, it is a mitzvah, but we want to de-emphasize. You're not doing it because you have to do it. You're doing it because so too. If the purpose of Bikur Cholim is you want to make the person feel good that you're coming. If his wife made him come, or you're not going to, in fact, make him feel bad. It's a burden, and you don't even want to be here. So you have to, so specifically, if you're going to come, you have to make it constructive to the chola, that he gets something out of it, and that's why the Rambam's call is you don't make a bracha on a mitzvah b'ram chaver. So let's summarize. So we gave different reasons why, even though Bikur Cholim, according to some, is a mitzvah min Torah, according to others it's only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, yet we know we make brachas all the time. So why no bracha? No class next week. So why no bracha on a mitzvah midrash? So why no bracha? So we gave the Ar Zarua on any continuous mitzvah. You don't make a bracha. Birkas Torah. That's the Birkas Shevach Valda, or because Talmud Torah Lahanas, the purpose of Torah is for learning, and therefore we're not worried you're not going to have the chaviva for it. Or the second approach was the Rashba. It's totally b'das acherim. I only can make a bracha if it's dependent on me. Maybe the ani won't accept. Maybe the person doesn't want me to come. So any mitzvah which is dependent on someone else, Chazal never instituted a bracha. The third one, that we don't want to make a bracha on prunios, ein mafsikim v'kolos. We don't want to make a bracha on look like we're celebrating the downfall of your friend. Your enemy comes, and therefore it's something which is kilkul. So it looks, we don't want it to make it appear like we're happy that you're sick, and therefore we're making a bracha. So no bracha on that. The fourth one is on mitzvah sichlis, on any common sense law that even Goyim do. So you only make a bracha when it's recognizable that you're doing a mitzvah. And the Rambam gives us a general rule that you don't make a bracha on any mitzvah b'edem chavero, because it doesn't make any sense. The purpose of b'edem chavero is to get to av and reyes, you develop a relationship with someone, and therefore Chazal didn't want to do something that could interfere with the mitzvah, the actual fulfillment of helping out the ani or helping out the person, and therefore Chazal said no bracha on Bikur Cholim.